I'm Chef Ange. Welcome to my new studio kitchen. This is the first episode that we're going to film inside the studio kitchen, so I want to make sure it's a special one. What I'm going to show you today is going to be one of my favorite recipes, is wonderful chili that we're going to put inside of an acorn squash. I've been making this one for years. We love it at home. It's a really great recipe. It's super easy and everyone likes it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to prep our vegetables. Then we're going to go over by the stove. We're going to assemble everything. We're going to let that slow cook, and then while that's cooking, I'm going to cook an acorn squash and we're going to put it all together in the end. Let's start off by prepping our vegetables. First thing we're going to do is we're going to cut our onion. We want like fine vegetables, but at the same time it's got to have a little bites, but most of these are going to be pretty small. We're going to put a whole onion inside this chili. Onions go in everything, so we're going to put it inside chili. Now to cut our onion, I'm going to pull it all the way to the back end of the board. I'm going to get my knife going through. I can actually go through twice. This is a pretty big onion. Now from here I'm going to cut strips down. And then from here we'll cut downward, making, I don't know, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch pieces. When we get down to the end, I'm gonna fine dice through there. Whenever we're cooking, take all your prep ingredients that you cut and put them inside little containers for assembly by the stove. It just makes cooking that much easier. A lot of cooking is organization, so the more organized you are and the more neat you are, the easier it is. Next thing we're going to cut is we're going to cut our peppers. Peppers we're going to cut really similar to the onions. When I'm cutting my peppers and I want to get a good dice on them, peppers have sides to them. We're going to push down on one side and cut one flat side off. Same thing over here, and then the same thing on this third side. I'll take the bottom, clip that off, and now there's not much left. Okay, so now on your peppers, you're just going to cut really thin strips. I like to just drag my knife tip, and if my knife is sharp enough, it should just pull right through, nice and easy. And I have really good control over the pepper, because pepper's a little slimy and they get a little slippery. So you want to make sure that you always have good control over whatever you're cutting. I'm going to push all the way through and chop, getting some pretty small peppers here. And I'm going to keep doing that for the rest of it. Now we'll do the same thing to our red pepper. So again, we'll cut the sides off, slices all the way through. And from here we'll take our slices and cut down into our smaller pieces. Last, that thing that's going to go in there that's a vegetable is going to be our garlic. And this we're just going to clip off the top, and I got a bunch of cloves of garlic here. So I'm just going to clip the top off of all of these. And now from here what we're going to do is we're going to pull the clove to this end of the board to make sure that we get the handle away. And now I'm just going to push down, smash the clove of garlic before I chop it. So smash, and that just helps release all the juices from the garlic. So now from here, we'll chop our garlic. We'll just go rough chop all the way through, and then I'll do our chop where we fan the blade through the garlic, and then as the pile spreads out, we just push it together. You keep aiming for the big pieces, and you just fan back and forth a couple of times. When the pile gets too spread out, you clean the knife, push everything back to center. So now let's chop up some of our garnishes, because after we plate this, we're going to put some red onion and some scallion greens on top. I'm going to cut this the same way that I cut the onion. Now we'll cut the scallion greens. We're not going to use the white part, so we're just going to use the top part. The white part I can use for something else that I cook later in the week. And what I like to do too is keep the roots on, and when you put them inside water, the green parts will grow back if you leave them for long enough inside your fridge with water. So let's clip off the top of these that get a little raggedy. Put that in our scrap bowl. And now from here, I'm just going to cut really small slices. So now let's cut the acorn squash. This has a woody stem on it, and it's a pretty dense squash. So make sure that you're taking your time cutting this, because anytime you're cutting anything with a woody stem, the cutting can get pretty tough. Make sure that your knife is sharp. So how I like to cut this is I'll find a nice flat spot on that it sits nice and flat, and I'll push my knife straight down into the cutting board. Once I get a good connection between the cutting board, I'll hold on the other side and I'll cleaver down. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side, getting my nice 2 halves. So now we're going to clean out the inside of the acorn squash, because this is where the chili is going to go. So I'll take just a spoon, and I'm trying to get a little bit of the flesh to make a nice big hole, because this is now going to act as our bowl for our chili. Before we clean up, we'll do the messiest. So these are canned chipotle peppers in an adobo sauce, and this is what's going to add some flavor and also the spice to our chili. These are a little messy, so I like to do them last. How hot you want to make the chili is how many peppers you're going to throw in. I like 1 for like a slightly spicy but mild chili, 2 for a medium, 3 or more for a hot. Right now we're just going to do 2. And now we're going to dice these seeds and all. They're very, very soft, so I don't really have to do much to chop them. And now I'll just chop them up pretty fine. And this is a piece of beef chuck. I like my chili to have like small little chunks of whole meat in addition to the ground meat. We're gonna have to take this and we're gonna have to chop this into really fine cubes. So on this piece of chuck, I got this big fat line running right through the middle that I'm probably gonna wanna get rid of because that probably won't render down. Now to slice our meat pretty thinly, we'll go and slice strips of meat. And when you're cutting meat, a sharp knife really, really helps. Let the knife do a lot of the work. Just think about just drawing that knife along the meat, and then we'll cut the strips into little chunks. And we're trying to keep it as little as possible. Again, chili's not a stew, it's like more like a soup. So we're gonna cook this inside a Dutch oven. You can cook it in any like large pot, but you want that pot to be pretty heavy and pretty large because this is a large quantity of meat. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna season this meat. We're just gonna put just a little oil on top of it with some salt and pepper. We're gonna sear this and then remove it. Then get our ground beef going and then throw in the vegetables and some salt. And now we'll just get our hands in there and just evenly distribute that. So we got our Dutch oven pretty hot, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of oil. And we're gonna take that ground chuck that we sliced and we're gonna throw it in here. And if you don't hear that sizzle, you didn't let it heat up enough. I'm gonna move the meat around and try to get as much of it touching the pot as possible. So we're getting from maximum color, and as much of this is touching the pot as possible. And now I'm just gonna leave it and let it sear for a minute. Anytime we can get browning and searing, that's just gonna add extra flavor. So it looks like we got some nice color on a lot of this. Once the meat starts to release moisture, like it is doing right now, a lot of that searing potential is over. Just make sure your heat's turned up as high as you can. As the moisture evaporates, you might get some on the outside. But now you can see a lot of the moisture is being released out. So we're not gonna get much more browning out of that meat. And so I'm taking this meat out with a slotted spoon, reserving the juices and the fat inside there. So once I got those all out, I'm gonna add my ground beef. I've already broken up by hand a little bit, and that's just gonna help me get it to more of that ground beef consistency. And try to work this into as much of ground meat consistency as possible. We don't want really any big chunks because that's what the chuck is for. As you keep chopping it and as it keeps cooking, it won't get stuck back together, and it makes that nice crumbly ground beef consistency that we all know. This is a pretty good consistency. The first thing we're gonna add is we're gonna add our onions because we want these to cook down and get really soft. So I'm gonna add the onions. I'll mix them around with the meat so they can cook for a little bit before we add the peppers. Once the onions start to get a little translucent, we're gonna start dumping in the rest of our vegetables. So first we're gonna put in our garlic, and we're gonna add our bell pepper. Give this a little mix. Incorporate that bell pepper into the meat and the onions. Give them a chance to cook for a little bit together. And you're just adding it in, layer by layer. Now from here, let's add some of our spices. So this is chili powder and some ancho chili powder. I like a combination of the two. And these are the main characters in the flavor of chili. That's why it's called chili. And you're gonna want a decent amount of chili powder in there. Now let's put some of our supporting characters in there. So this is some smoked paprika. I got some garlic powder and some onion powder. And it's a little bit less than the chili powder. And now we'll mix these in there. And I still have the heat up pretty high, but I'm very active and I'm making sure that I'm moving everything to make sure that, you know, there might be a little bit of browning, but nothing's burning. But if I cook it too low, everything's just gonna steam, and I might not get some flavors that I'm missing out on. Now we're gonna add our seared chuck right back in there with the juices and everything. And now we have this beautiful mixture of meat and these aromatics and the peppers and the spices. This smells fantastic already. So now let's add our liquid base. I like to use just canned tomatoes, and I got 1 can of crushed and 1 can of pureed. So now at this point, I'll turn the heat down and let a lot of the residual heat warm up the tomato sauce. And now let's add some more flavors. We're gonna put a splash of some apple cider vinegar, a little Worcestershire sauce, maybe a tablespoon, some chicken bouillon paste. If you don't have a chicken bouillon paste, you can use just a chicken bouillon cube. I like a little bit of maple syrup for some sweetness, maybe a tablespoon or 2. And these are a couple squares of dark chocolate. I really add a nice earthy flavor to it. And this is as dark gets. That's 100% dark chocolate. Last of our flavor elements are those chipotle peppers that we chopped up. And I like beans in my chili, and these are just some canned beans. I like to put them in last because canned beans, they're already soft, so I don't want to mush them around while I'm mixing everything. This is going to be the last of the mixing. So now that we've assembled the chili, everything's basically in there with the liquid. Now I can just dump my beans in and just give it a final mix before I let it simmer. We're going to clean up a little bit. We're going to put the cover on here. We're going to let this simmer for maybe like 45 minutes at the minimum. You could probably go up to like an hour and a half, but you put it on the lowest setting, and then you just let this simmer. While this is simmering, we're going to take care of our acorn squash and get that in the oven, so everything's cooking and all going to be ready all at the same time. Now that our chili's on the stove, it's covered, it's simmering. I got about 45 minutes to an hour before we're ready to eat the chili. So now let's take care of our acorn squash bowls. So these are gonna go on top of this baking tray, and you can see that when an acorn squash is sitting, it kind of sits on a little bit of an angle, so we gotta straighten these up. So a little hack that I found, that this is how you'll serve it too, is we'll take just a really thin strip of aluminum foil, and I'll just fold it in half a few times till I get a pretty stiff piece that's maybe about a 1/2 inch thick. And now from here, I'll just tie it together and give it a little squeeze. Now I got this nice little moldable ring. And so now we got these nice little rings that we're gonna put acorn squash on top of. And now I can position them so they sit nice and flat. I'll take a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of cinnamon, and I'll sprinkle that on top. I don't have to be too exact because I'm gonna rub it all in. And this is just my base seasoning. If you don't know what my base seasoning is, it's olive oil, it's garlic powder, onion powder, salt, and pepper. And if you want exact ratios, check out episode 5. And I'll give this a little sprinkle on top. And now by hand, I'll just rub the oil, the cinnamon, and the base seasoning. So now these are going to go in a 385 degree oven for about 45 minutes to an hour. And what I'm looking for is just nice browning on the top, and they're cooked all the way through. And I can just find that just by sticking a knife into it and see if they're soft. See if there's any resistance on the knife. But let's take these, let's throw these in an oven for about 45 minutes, and we'll check them at that point, and while our chili's cooking. So our acorn squash is all done cooking. You can see a little bit of liquid is collected in there. We're just going to put on our hot hands. Be really careful not to squish them, but we're going to dump that liquid that collected in there. We're going to just dump it right in the sink. And these are really soft because they're fully cooked. They're beautifully seasoned, super tender. So our chili's all done cooking, and I've turned the oven up a little bit. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna fill the acorn squash bowls with the chili. We're gonna top it with some shredded cheddar cheese, and then we're gonna throw it back in the oven and let the cheese melt on top of the chili. So now I'll take a ladle and give it a good mix before, and the chili's gonna go right in there. So now I'll take some shredded cheddar cheese, we'll pile that right on top. So now we'll take this, we'll put this back in the oven for just a few minutes. Melt that cheese. Wow, that looks so good. And now I'm gonna be really careful, and I'm gonna pick up the acorn squash by the aluminum ring, and then I'm gonna put it down. I'm gonna make sure that the aluminum ring isn't stuck to the aluminum foil, so I'll just push it with a spoon really quick. So I'll pick it up by the ring, I'll put it right down in the bowl. Nice. So now we're gonna top with, I like to use Greek yogurt, but you can use sour cream. We're gonna put just a dollop of Greek yogurt right on top, some of those red onions that we chopped up earlier, and some of those scallion greens. Now honestly, how good does this look? This is an amazing dish that you can serve on a weekday, on a weeknight, for yourself, or for when guests come over. Nobody's gonna be mad that you're serving them this. Let's see how we did here. That is so good. That's really, really good. Like I said, nobody's gonna be upset that you're serving them this. Well, thanks for watching. Let me know how it comes out in the comments on this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Share this video so other people can enjoy this too. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.